but like in a kind of an ass kicking way of like, just like get over your shit and start writing, and like stop making excuses and stop, telling yourself you'll do it tomorrow, just do it. And I think I found that very helpful, because I think as writers, we like to procrastinate. And like, I always like to make excuses of like, oh, well, I had to get up early this morning and I'm kind of tired now, so I probably shouldn't have to write tonight. And, that's how you end up going 2 months without writing anything, is by making excuses for yourself. So yeah, it's the war of arts is definitely a good kick in the ass if you're looking for one.
Welcome again to Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting. To coincide with the final episodes of Cobra Kai that just came out on Netflix, I wanted to share a replay of our interview with Cobra Kai writer Mattea Greene. Every season of Cobra Kai since season 2, Mattea has kicked ass and worked her way up. For season 6, she became the executive story editor. At the time of this interview, she wrote the season 3 episode, The Good, the Bad, and the Badass, when she was a writer's assistant and script coordinator. Please enjoy this interview with Cobra Kai writer Mattea Greene.
Our guest today is Mattea Greene, known for being a writer on Cobra Kai, being a stand-up comedian, and writing one of the best episodes of Cobra Kai, The Good, the Bad, and the Badass. Welcome, Mattea.
Thanks for having me.
So our first question, we were curious how you came up in Cobra Kai, because we know you started as a script coordinator. So what was the journey like becoming a writer on the show?
So I started on season 2 as the showrunner's assistant, which is the best introduction you can have to television. Because I got to sit in on the writer's room. I got to go to set in Atlanta, and I got to hang out in post-production as well. So I was just shadowing the showrunners through all of it. And then for season 3, they promoted me to writer's assistant and script coordinator. In that job, if you've ever had that job, it's a tough one, but you do sometimes get a chance to pitch in the room. Sometimes you get thrown, a couple of smaller things to write. And I did, my best with those. And so they ended up assigning me a script for season 3. And so that's the one that you just talked about, The Good, the Bad, and the Badass, just came out on Netflix. And then when we got the season 4 pickup, they bumped me up to staff writer. And they are filming season 4 right now. So that's where we are.
Nice. Did you want to be a writer before that?
I moved out to LA 6 years ago with the goal of becoming a writer. I started as an assistant for an agent at CIA. I worked for a TV lit agent, which again is a really great experience to see that side of the business. And then after a year and a half or so, I went to work for one of her clients for a couple years, and then wound up on Cobra Kai after that.
Nice.
Awesome. Has stand-up helped you write for TV?
It has. I think the most important thing is just, the confidence of like getting up on stage, saying something and hearing it bomb, and then like not dying. Because that's like most people's worst nightmare is, getting on stage and getting a horrible reaction. But once you do that, if you're stand-up, you're doing that every single night, like 3 or 4 times a night. And once you get used to it, then you get used to the idea of, being in a writer's room and saying something, and you're not worried so much about looking stupid, and you're not worried about having your ideas rejected. So it's definitely helpful in terms of the way you approach it. It made me a lot better at pitching and just sort of having the confidence and not getting butthurt every time my ideas got shot down.
Were you a stand-up before you were a writer?
No, I was a writer first, and it was something that I started doing because I just thought maybe this will help me with my writing. Maybe this will make me a better writer. And I ended up just loving stand-up on its own as well. It's kind of hard to do right now. I haven't been doing a lot of Zoom shows or anything like that because it's just, it's not the same for me. But yeah, it's something that I was drawn to for the writing side of it. I'm not an actor. I'm not a performer. I just really like the chance to write in a very different style. Stand-up is really all about brevity and getting to the point quickly, which is another thing that's very useful in TV writing.
Did stand-up help with the career at all? Like networking?
It has a little bit, I think it's definitely one of the things, working on Cobra Kai, I had sent my bosses a clip of my stand-up, and like, because it's a 5-minute clip versus, a like 30 or 60 page script, they were, more likely to watch it. Yeah. So, it helps in that way. I was never like a big enough stand-up to get any opportunities, from that. I wasn't like doing the Comedy Store every night or anything like that. Just small shows around town. But I think it helped more in terms of my attitude and my writing and my confidence, more so than in any kind of networking.
Nice. I never imagined the stand-up set as a sample. That's definitely something to think about. Do you have a favorite comedian?
I've always loved John Mulaney. I think he's one of the best writers in stand-up. I think if you look at his act, the way he chooses his words so carefully, and I think people don't realize that stand-ups do that. I think you watch Marvelous Miss Maisel and she just goes up there and talks. And that's, some people can do that, but a lot of the great stand-ups are very good writers, and they are very careful with their word choice. And that's something that I really like about John Mulaney.
So how do you make a great joke?
A great joke is just about surprise. You have to set the audience up to expect one thing and then do something else, basically. So a really good joke, a really good example. I can't even remember who it was. It's not a nice joke. It's battered women. Sounds delicious. That's the joke. It's horrific, right? But it's so surprising. It is
not where I thought you were going to go.
Yeah.
Very simple and, shocking, but also it's extremely effective. So it's, the setup, tell the audience what to expect, and then the punchline is the subversion of that expectation. And you can do it in 4 words.
I love that. Okay, let's get back to Cobra Kai, because let's be honest, we really want to talk about it. We love the show. So what was it like writing on Cobra Kai?
It's a great experience. Especially, for my first ever script, I was learning from some really incredible writers, people, who have written huge movies, and obviously I created this hit show. So that it was a great learning experience. You're writing for amazing actors and iconic characters in Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka. So that's really exciting. You're playing in this sandbox that, every kid who watched The Karate Kid wanted to play in. And so it was just a really gratifying, fun experience. I wasn't on set for my episode, so, I didn't get to be part of the production side, but I was in post-production for it. And it's just, so cool to watch it come to life and see actors saying the words that you wrote. It's really exciting.
Did you watch Karate Kid as a kid?
I read the novelization before I ever watched the movie, because I wasn't allowed to watch a ton of movies growing up or a ton of TV. And so I read a lot of books. So I had read it, and then I don't think I ever watched the movie until I was in college, and it was just, nothing looked the way I had imagined it. It was a very weird experience, but yeah, I had watched the original Karate Kid movie. I didn't watch the sequels until I got the job on Cobra Kai. But the original, it's, even if you haven't seen it, it. It's just so iconic, and there's so many lines that get repeated, and I knew what the crane kick looked like even without having seen it before.
Do you have a favorite character to write for?
My favorite character is always Tory. I think she's, she's the character who I wish we could spend an entire show with to delve into, her past and all of her issues. I think she's, the character who really doesn't give a shit what people think about her. She cares about, herself and her family. And I think she has some pretty serious trauma in her life. And in a way, this is a show about trauma and about the ways that people deal with their own trauma. And I think it's interesting to see someone who, in another environment, if she had joined Miyagi-Do, could be just taking a totally different path, but she, fell in, unfortunately, with the wrong dojo. And that's how this world works. You get in the wrong dojo, you're an evil person now.
Do you have a favorite episode of the show? And the answer can be yours. And what made it your favorite?
I think actually my favorite episode is probably 305, Miyagi-Do, written by the amazing Bob Dearden. It's the episode where Daniel learns, there's so much going on in that episode, and like it's the episode Daniel learns the secrets of Miyagi-Do. It's the episode where Miguel starts to show some progress in his recovery, and then there's that incredible dual fight sequence, you know, between Robbie and Juvie, and then the kids at the laser tag place. So I mean, there's just so much going on. There's Amanda and Kreese. It's like that must have been a very difficult one to shoot. I remember in post-production, it was like, oh my gosh, this is just, you think the episode's ending and then there's another thing and then another thing. And so that was definitely a really fun one to watch for me.
Nice.
So you've also done the production side of things, and has that helped with writing? Do you feel like that's improved your writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really important for writers to be aware of what is and isn't shootable, not just in terms of writing, you know, ridiculous CGI flying dragons or whatever into your scripts. Like, I think most logical people know that that's not shootable, but just simple things. Like I remember in an early script, I'd written a sequence where the characters were like running back and forth across the soccer field. And my boss at the time told me, like, you know what, that's actually going to be kind of annoying to shoot. Why don't you have them stay in place doing like burpees instead? And it's that kind of thought process that you don't really understand until you're on set and you're watching people move the camera and watching them work with the actors and understanding things like, you know, don't ever, you know, you don't want too many like one-line characters, because if you can condense them, you know, you can save a lot of money. You don't want a ton of different locations. You don't want, you know, things like, you know, with the Hawk character on Cobra Kai, you know, he has this gigantic back tattoo. And so anytime we have Hawk taking off his shirt, that's like, that kid has to spend 2 hours in the makeup chair. And so stuff like that, you know, I think once you're on set, you start to learn a lot about it, and you start to write scripts that are just a lot more producible, which makes them more enticing for studios and for producers who want to make them.
How do they keep his hair up, by the way? Like,
that's his real hair. That is the actor's real hair. They use what I'm sure is just an insane amount of hair products. They might put some extensions in it, but yeah, that's the other thing that takes a long time. I mean, that poor kid spends, I think, like 3 or 4 hours in hair and makeup every day.
Is he over 18 though?
He is now, yeah. So it's okay now. When the show started, he wasn't yet, and so that was a difficulty. Oh. Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, you learn being on set is if you have actors who are under 18, there are time limits. If they are under 16, there are even more time limits. And so you never want to write anything with kids. You don't want to write anything with pets. It's just a lot of things you don't think about until you've actually seen it in action.
So do you have any advice on thriving in a Zoom room?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. It's not as bad as I think we all thought it was going to be, is what I'll say. I mean, I think when you heard, you know, virtual Zoom room, everyone was just like, oh my gosh, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be glitchy. It's really not that bad. I think you have to have showrunners who are sort of looking around, or, you know, someone running the room, looking around for the people who are trying to speak and can't get a word in, or you have to have some sort of system, because it's so easy for someone to get drowned out if their microphone isn't loud enough. So I think it's incumbent on the person running the room to really notice that, but it's helpful if all the writers can, you know, talk about and agree, okay, we're going to have a hand raising system, or if you have something to say, put it in the chat if you can't get a word in. So, you know, it is difficult in that respect, but, you know, it does take everyone being a little more conscious of other people trying to speak. And if you see someone trying to speak and getting cut off, then especially if you're a more senior writer, then, you know, you should say, hey, look, Rand is trying to say something, or she's been trying to say something for a few minutes here. Let's let her talk for a second.
Yeah. How big is your room, and what's the ratio of returning writers and new writers?
There are 10 of us, including the showrunners for season 4. 8 people were returning, not including me. And so me, and then there was one other new writer. Most of the writing staff, probably the core of the writing staff, has been on the show since season 1. We've had a few new additions who've stuck around and, you know, brought a lot of new energy and new ideas to the room, which is always great. But it's also great to have people who have been on the show since day one and, are just like really intimately familiar with all the characters and the intentions of the creators from the beginning.
So you are working with a very famous franchise. How is that? How many liberties do you feel like you can take with that, or is it pretty restrictive?
It's not restrictive because we're not, it's not a remake or anything. We are, in the Karate Kid universe, but we are, we have new characters. We can do new things with the characters. Everybody, all the writers are huge Karate Kid fans. And so we do like, to pay homage to the movies, even in small ways, wherever we can. I wouldn't call it restrictive at all, though. I think it's just, there are things we wouldn't do on the show. Like we wouldn't, come out and say, oh, actually Miyagi was secretly a horrible person and did all of these awful things. Like that's, something that would upset the fans and that would upset us too. But it's certainly not restrictive because we can create new characters whenever we want. And we can also bring back old characters. So I think it's actually kind of freeing in a way because you have a really solid foundation to build a whole new world on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This is kind of random. How did they come up with the name Eagle Fang?
Eagle Fang. I can't remember. I was there that day. I can't remember the exact thing. I remember we had just this huge list of possible names. And then, obviously Johnny's favorite movie is Iron Eagle. And then, I think someone said Eagle Fang. And then right away I was like, yes, that's just the perfect thing.
Yeah, totally. It was hilarious too. It's awesome. How do you balance fighting and story? Like, is there fighting every episode, or at least in the third season, or how do you guys plan the fights?
Yeah, there are I think in season 2 we had like a major action sequence in every single episode. Season 3, not quite as much. We see the fights as being a part of the story. They're never fighting just to fight or because we haven't had a fight in a while, I guess they should fight. It's always motivated by story and character. Fighting is the way that these people deal with their problems. So, if somebody's going through a hard time or someone's clashing with another character in some way, then it would make sense for them to get into a fight. But it's not something that we do just because. It's always motivated by story.
What is some of your advice for writing a great fight scene?
I think, focusing on the characters and their emotions going into the fight scene, because, it's not the writer's job to come up with like super awesome choreography, because you're going to have fight choreographers on set and stunt people on set who know a lot more than most writers do. And so, you can always leave that part to the professionals. The writing part, you want to make sure that everything is motivated by the characters and what they're going through at the time. If someone is losing a fight, there needs to be a reason why. Are they, in an emotional bad space, or do they have something going on? If someone's winning, there should be a reason why. I think just making sure that everything is motivated is probably the most important thing to do.
Yeah. Do you do karate yourself?
I don't do karate. I did Taekwondo as a kid, and I do Krav Maga now, which is, kind of a Cobra Kai mentality, but a lot more about practicality than about doing cool flying kicks.
Mm-hmm. Do you find doing that stuff yourself is helpful in writing?
It can be helpful. It's useful to have, a very like basic knowledge of certain things, but most of the writers don't have any kind of karate background. It's also, the show isn't like super strict about like if you watch the fights, if you're a martial arts expert, you'll notice they're not doing pure karate all the time. It's a mix of stuff. It's a fun action movie kind of thing. It doesn't always have to be super true to reality. But it's helpful to know a few things. But it's also good to just use your imagination and to focus on what makes the most sense for the story and for the characters versus, this specific move isn't a karate move, therefore they can't do it. Like that's not fun for anyone.
Have you gotten any backlash from the karate community of people being like, that's not correct?
I don't think so. I think most people are just excited about the show, and I think it has brought, some more interest into karate. it's unfortunate that, the Netflix debut happened during the pandemic and most karate dojos are closed, because I'd be interested to see if, enrollment went up at all. But I don't think anyone, expects the show to be like a strict recreation of all karate moves. If they do expect that, then, they should have probably given that up by now.
Do you have any favorite projects before Cobra Kai? And you talk about Cagney and Lacey?
Yeah, that was a pilot I worked on. So I worked for 2 years, I worked for Bridget Carpenter, who was a showrunner. She had worked on Friday Night Lights and Parenthood and, just a lot of really amazing dramas. And she had a few pilots at CBS that unfortunately didn't go forward. Yeah, Cagney and Lacey was a really cool experience, just watching her kind of come up with the pilot and sort of learning the whole network police procedural sort of type, because that was not something I'd ever done before or thought about doing. But it is really useful because the structure of it is, you have to have like a huge twist going to every single commercial break. And I think, in the era of streamers and stuff, people hear that and they're like, oh, that sounds so restrictive and artificial, but it's actually incredibly useful because it forces you to basically keep getting and earning your audience's attention and to keep giving people a reason to come back. I think a lot of streaming shows have the issue of feeling sort of saggy in the middle, or overly long. And I think that's where having a bit of a background in broadcast and shows like Cagney and Lacey can come in handy, because it teaches you to keep grabbing people's attention.
And network television is very underrated.
It is, yeah. There's some really good network shows. I've always really enjoyed, actually, like a lot of the CW shows. Like Jane the Virgin was my favorite show on TV for a very long time. And, they are underrated. They don't get as much attention, but, that's the landscape.
Do you have a favorite writer?
Favorite writer is whoever I'm trying to get to hire me at the moment.
Adjacent to that, do you have a favorite writer to work with?
I've only worked on Cobra Kai so far. I would say those guys are definitely my favorite writers. I think they just approach this with such a fun attitude of like not taking it too seriously, but also taking it seriously enough to show how much they love the original franchise and to win over the original fans. But they also, have a sense of humor. There's a line in my episode where the city councilwoman says, frankly, I don't understand the Valley's fascination with karate. And, this is in the middle of an extremely dramatic sequence about winning back the All Valley. And yet, the writers take a step back and say, yes, we know this is kind of ridiculous, but these characters really do care. And so that's something that I've really appreciated working with, is just the attitude of like, yes, we're sincere in how much we care about this, but we also are aware of, the inherent craziness of this premise. And, we're going to make sure you're aware as well.
Totally.
In Cobra Kai, you guys do a lot, you deal with, different personalities and things of like he was, talking down to kids and stuff like that. Do you guys sit there and talk about that kind of toxic masculinity type of behavior versus babying people, all of that? Do you guys sit down and talk about that?
In a sense, I think there's an awareness about like, nobody on the show is like, none of the writers are like Johnny types who are berating people all the time. We're all much closer to Daniel. We're a nice group of people. I think, there's just an eagerness to show both sides. There's, an absolute truth to the way Johnny talks to kids and the way he motivates people can be very helpful for some people. But when you go too far with it, then you end up with a situation like Johnny was in himself, where you become a very toxic person. So, we haven't talked about, in the abstract sense of toxic masculinity, we do talk about a lot in the more as it applies to the characters as, well, Johnny was taught this way and that's why he acts this way. Or, Tory was taught this and that's why she's reacting this way. So that's something we talk about a lot. How the way you're taught and the way the environment you live in, how that affects you is something that we talk about a lot for the characters.
Do you also get into the conversation of what's right and what's wrong, or do you try to stay away from that?
We stay away from it in like concrete terms. I think we talk about it a lot in how the characters see it. So, Johnny thought that talking to the kids this way was the right thing to do. And then he saw what Miguel did at the tournament and the way Miguel was acting, and he sort of realized the error of his ways. So we tried to show, this is a show where there's a lot of gray areas. No one's completely right or wrong. And so I think we try to show always through the characters' perspectives and how they learn to change their ways, and how, this thing that they were taught might not be so great anymore, or maybe this was useful in one way, but it's not useful in another.
I love like all the character arcs too. Like, do you guys plan those? How much do you plan those in advance, character arcs?
So the showrunners do have, a long-term plan for the show, and there are things, that they wanted to do in season 1 that they didn't end up doing until later seasons, and so on. They do come into every season with a sort of a general plan of like, okay, well, this is a season where, they always knew season 3 would end with Johnny and Daniel working together for the first time. And then it was just a matter of, okay, how do we get them to that place, and what has to happen to make that happen? With the other characters, with the more, minor characters, there's a lot more leeway and a lot more things change as we go through the writer's room process. We mostly do work season to season for all of the characters, although we did, some things, they always knew that Johnny and Daniel would end up working together against Kreese, and they were timing it to be around the end of season 3. But a lot of stuff we, work out as we go.
So when you say the showrunners had a long-term plan, how long is this long-term?
This show, it's not going to go on forever. I mean, we don't have an endpoint yet. I don't think it's going to be like, it's not going to be like The Simpsons where it just keeps going and going and going. I think there will be a natural endpoint to this story. I have no idea when that will be. But, I'm hoping that we get a few more seasons. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
Nice. Are you thinking about what to do when that happens, what your next job will be? How do you kind of set yourself up for the next point of your career?
Yeah, I mean, so you always have to be working on something. While I was working on Cobra Kai season 4, I was also finishing up a pilot that my managers were sending around. And so that's something that could be getting me the next job. And even now, we're on hiatus at the moment. I'm working on other stuff. So, yeah, you do always have to be thinking about it. But, there's also a lot of things that are just out of your control. I'm lucky I have really great reps who, are sending me around to a lot of places. I'm also lucky to be coming off of a show that is quite popular and that a lot of people really like. So, that's very helpful as well. And all you can really do is just write the best things that you can write and, try to put them out into the world and hope that it works out.
How did you get repped?
So my manager is actually, she was my first boss. I was her assistant at CIA. And then when she left to be a manager, and after I got my promotion to staff writer, I called her. And so I think that's the tough part, is that a lot of new writers start looking for reps. And, if you don't already have a writing credit, like a manager or agent isn't going to be able to do anything for you anyway. Nobody wants to give someone their first job. The only way to get your first writing job really is to either be extremely lucky or to have some sort of connection to the showrunners. So I was, lucky enough to have gotten the writer's assistant job and to have gotten my staff writing job that way. And as soon as you have that credit, especially on a hit show, I mean, managers are happy to take your call. So
totally. Do you have any routines, or like, what do you do to make yourself a stronger writer?
I read a lot. I read a lot of novels. I've been reading, in quarantine, just a ton of mystery novels. And because I've been, trying to work on a mystery show, a murder mystery. I want to say I have a routine, really. I don't do, writing exercises or anything like that. I do try to write every day, and I do just try to read all the time and to watch all the new stuff that's coming out. Yeah, I don't, have a set, I'm not one of those, I sit down at my desk at 9 a.m. and I write for 2 hours and then I eat lunch, and I don't do that. Unless I'm like on a deadline. I'm more, I try to write every day, but it's not always at the same time. As long as it gets done, the routine doesn't quite matter as much to me.
Right. I had a routines question. I'm going to cross that one out. My other one is, what are your deadlines like for Cobra Kai?
It depends, for this past season, I had a week from the time we finished breaking the episode to turn in the first outline. And from there, I spent about 3 weeks, I think, probably on the first draft. But then the showrunners were just totally buried and didn't have time to read it. And I didn't end up doing a rewrite until a couple weeks later. And then there was a point where they needed another rewrite and I had 3 days to do it. So it varies depending on production. If you're on a network show where they're doing 22 episodes a season, then you're going to have a very strict timeline. You're going to have maybe a week to churn out a first draft. Cobra Kai is not quite that strict. We have a little bit more time, but we also don't leave the room while we're on script. We stay in the room. And so you're writing on your own time. That's, it does vary a lot depending on where we are in the process.
Interesting. Do you do any rewrites as a room, or is it usually just the individual writers being sent off?
It's usually just the individual writers. So our writers' room wraps up before production starts. And so a lot of the times the showrunners, won't get around to reading the later scripts until we're already in production and the writers' room is closed. So, we don't do a ton of room writing, obviously, because everyone's moved on.
And then in that case, do they do the rewrite or do they reach out to them?
It depends. For my episode, because I was available and I did have time, I did the rewrite. For a couple other episodes, the writers were already working on other things and I think just didn't have the time. So the showrunners or one of the other, co-EPs who were on set did the rewrite.
Favorite writing advice or favorite writing books? I
think the best advice is just always look for motivation. No one should ever just be doing things because that's what they're supposed to do right now. It should always be always ask yourself, why are these people doing this? Why is this person saying this line? Why is this person doing this? Why is this person leaving this scene at the moment? There should always be a reason for everything.
At first, I thought that was a much more existential answer. And you were saying, find our motivation to be writing. Why are we writing? No, character motivation. Got it.
Yeah.
What is your purpose in life?
That I can't help you with. That you're on your own.
Are there any books you'd recommend?
I really liked this book called it's called The War of Art. And it's kind of this very motivational, but in a kind of an ass kicking way of just get over your shit and start writing and stop making excuses and stop, telling yourself you'll do it tomorrow, just do it. And I think I found that very helpful because I think as writers, we like to procrastinate. And I always like to make excuses of oh, well, I had to get up early this morning and I'm kind of tired now, so I probably shouldn't have to write tonight. And, that's how you end up going 2 months without writing anything, is by making excuses for yourself. So yeah, it's The War of Arts is definitely a good kick in the ass if you're looking for one.
Yeah. So outside of writing, what shows are you watching?
So I'm super late to the game. I'm finally catching up on Stranger Things. I'm that person who when everyone's freaking out over a show, I'm well, I'm going to be the person who doesn't watch the show and is left out of this because, just because everyone else likes it doesn't mean I'm going to like it. Yeah, I am really enjoying it so far. It's a very fun, I, love all the 80s nostalgia, love all the references and all. I mean, they're, really just recreating a lot of our favorite movies, which is just, so much fun for me. I've really enjoyed that. And I'm really about to start this new show called It's a Sin, which I watched the pilot of. It's from Russell Davies. He's in the UK. It's about this sounds depressing. It's not. It's about AIDS in London in the 1980s. But what I like about it is that it really focuses on the joy of the LGBT characters and just it's sort of the LGBT story you never ever see, which is no, these people are happy and like they're having a really great time. And yes, this horrible thing is looming for them, but they're also normal people who find joy in their lives, and it's not all death and gloom all the time.
Mm-hmm. And do you have some favorite shows? I know you mentioned one earlier and now it's leaving my brain. Oh, Jane the Virgin, which is such a great show. Do you have any other favorites that you recommend to people?
Of all time.
Well, that's a great one. All time greatest show for me is Friday Night Lights. I think, it's just, I mean, I grew up in like a huge football town. Like our team wasn't actually good. We were terrible, but like just the culture around it and like I didn't even like football, and like we would still just go to the games every single Friday night. And I think that's like a thing that people who didn't grow up with it don't realize it's an actual thing. But it really is. And I mean, they just did such a great job of capturing that world and making you care about high school football. So for me, that's my all-time favorite.
Where'd you grow up?
Central Florida.
Oh.
We're in Central Florida.
Cocoa Beach, kind of near Orlando.
Got it.
It's a football town with no good football players.
I went to college in Florida, so I was just.
Oh, yeah. Where?
Miami.
Oh, cool. Yeah. They have better football players.
Bigger population, right?
Yeah.
That tends to help.
Yeah.
Small town, very small town. It's slim pickings, and your football teams, at least my football team, was not so good. In Cobra Kai, you do these flashbacks to the movies, and we were wondering if in season 1 it's the first movie, in season 2 it's the second movie, in season 3, or if you guys have any organization of the movies like that.
So we don't have like a specific organization of, season 2 will only refer to Karate Kid 2 or anything like that. It's more just a function of how the story has progressed. So, I mean, in season 1, we were just sort of introducing people to all these new characters and, showing how the results of how they've been affected by Karate Kid, especially because season 1, introduces you to adult Johnny, and he's only in the first movie, really. So there just wasn't room to really delve into Karate Kid 2 and 3 in season 1. And same thing in season 2, there just wasn't a ton of, there was a little bit of Karate Kid 3 in there, but there's just not a ton of space. I mean, there's so much to unpack from those movies. You can't fit it all into one season while you're also trying to tell new stories. So, we don't deliberately organize it in that way, but we do parcel it out. So it's not, you can't explain all of Karate Kid 3 like right off the bat in season 1, because then people are just gonna be like, no, this is too much. This is insane. What is this show? We do take our time, and we try to make sure that these flashbacks are always motivated by story and by where the characters are, and we're not just doing it just to do it. Daniel always has a reason for going to Mr. Miyagi memory. It's not just because we want to fit in another one now. It's always motivated by what he's doing in his story.
Do you only take from the movies, or are there like, the director's cut scenes, the ones that were never shown, or do you even film some extra scenes from the 80s?
So we have all of the dailies and all of the delete. So all of the footage that was shot for all of the movies we have access to. And so when we know what scene we want to refer to from the original movies, we will sometimes go and look through the footage and all of the footage and use a couple of angles that actually weren't even in the original movies if they help serve the purpose of the story. There are a couple of deleted scenes from the original movie that we've talked about using. We've definitely referred to a couple of them. None of them have quite made it in yet, but we're hoping to use one of the more famous scenes. There was a deleted scene of Johnny puts a blueberry pie under Daniel's seat and he sits in it, and then that starts a fight in the cafeteria, which didn't make it into the movie. And I don't think we've used it in the show yet, but that's something that we have access to.
I hope you guys do. I want to see that scene.
Yeah.
I can't make any promises, but it is, we have all of those deleted scenes and, things that the fans haven't seen yet. So it's always really cool to have all of that.
Well, your next episode should be the good, the bad, and the blueberry pie.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna clap for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. It's always fun to talk Cobra Kai. I love how much people love the show. It's really gratifying.
Thanks for listening to Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting. Subscribe, rate, and review for more episodes.
You can now follow Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting on YouTube and Instagram at Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting. Now, here's the joke of the podcast.
I want to know if you have a favorite joke.
Favorite joke of mine or favorite joke of someone else's?
Oh, no, yours.
Mine. My favorite joke is a joke that has never, ever, ever worked and never, ever will. The joke, it's I'm so Jewish, my safe word is Dayenu, which if you are not Jewish, that joke is not funny at all. If you are Jewish, that joke is hilarious. And it's really not, the word doesn't translate at all, so you can't explain it. And it's a stupid joke to be my favorite because it never works, but I love it and I'll stick to it.
One of my favorite jokes is also one that never works. And I just love it because it makes everybody uncomfortable because they don't get it.
Yeah. And, it works in shows, especially if you tell people, the follow-up to that line is for the non-Jews in the room, that was a really great joke. And I'm sorry you're missing out. And that always works. You pretend you're going to explain it and then you don't.